Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Numbers chapter 3 in a clear and simple way, step by step.
All right, to really get the simple meaning of this chapter, the Peshat, let's take a second to set the scene. Imagine exactly where we are right now. We're looking at a massive, sprawling city of tents, right out in the middle of the harsh desert of Sinai. It's the second year after the Israelites made their exodus out of Egypt. And sitting right there at the absolute center of this massive camp is the tabernacle, the tent of meeting. Now, this entire chapter is dedicated to one really specific, incredibly important thing: organizing the people who are going to care for this sacred space. We're going to walk through this explainer verse by verse, section by section. We won't skip a single part, so you can see exactly how the logistics of this community were set up.
So here is our roadmap for the explainer. First, context and Aaron's lineage. Second, counting the Levite clans. Third, redeeming the firstborns. Then we'll clarify some difficult terms, look at some practical life lessons, and finally finish up with a short chapter recap.
Okay, Section 1, Context and Aaron's Lineage. Let's dive right into the first 4 verses.
Before God actually hands out the monumental tasks of taking care of the sanctuary, the text explicitly establishes who is in charge by laying out the family line of Aaron and Moses at Mount Sinai. So, the text introduces us to Aaron's 4 sons. We have Nadab, who is the firstborn, then Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. Now, what's absolutely crucial to understand about these 4 men is that they were the anointed priests. They were formally ordained to serve in the priest's office, which basically means they were the ones authorized to stand before God on behalf of the people. But the text doesn't just stop at giving us their names. It immediately drops in a crucial, and honestly pretty tragic piece of history.
Right in verse 4, we get hit with a sudden, harsh reality. The text reminds us that Nadab and Abihu died, and they died without having any children. Why? Because they offered unauthorized or strange fire before the Lord right there in the desert of Sinai. Because they didn't have any sons to pass their priestly duties down to, the entire weight of the priesthood fell squarely onto the shoulders of the 2 remaining brothers, Eleazar and Ithamar. They had to step up and serve as priests during the lifetime of their father Aaron. This event proves a terrifying point right off the bat. The sanctuary is not a casual place. It requires extreme, absolute exactness.
Moving into verses 5 through 10, God does something really interesting. He takes the entire tribe of Levi and presents them wholly to Aaron. Their job? To keep charge of the tabernacle. There's a really strict division of labor being established here. Aaron and his sons, they are the appointed priests. They manage the sanctuary itself and handle the most holy duties. But the rest of the Levites, they're the assistants. They're the ones maintaining the furnishings, carrying the heavy loads, and doing all the physical labor of the tabernacle on behalf of the whole Israelite community. And the text is incredibly clear about this boundary. If anyone else, a common person, approaches the sanctuary to do these tasks, they are to be put to death. It's a system of absolute, strict boundaries. And if you're wondering why the Levites were chosen for this, verses 11 through 13 tell us exactly why. God explains that back when he struck down the firstborns in Egypt, he set apart all the firstborns of Israel as his own. Now, he's formally taking the Levites as a direct, one-to-one substitution for those firstborn Israelites. The Levites belong entirely to him.
That brings us to section 2, counting the Levite clans, covering verses 14 through 39.
Now, what's fascinating about this next part is how incredibly specific God's instructions are for taking this census. In verse 15, Moses is told to count every single male Levite, but notice the age requirement here. They are to be counted starting from just 1 month old and upward. Think about that for a second. In all the other military censuses in the Bible, men are counted starting from 20 years old, the age you can actually hold a sword and go to war. But here, 1 month old. Why is that? Well, it goes right back to what we just talked about. They're being counted to replace the firstborn children of Israel. And in that culture, a child's status as a viable firstborn was officially recognized at 1 month of age. So Moses obeys the Lord, and he starts counting the 3 main branches of the Levite family: the sons of Gershon, the sons of Kohath, and the sons of Merari.
Verses 17 through 37 map out this massive, highly organized logistical operation. Let's not rush through this because the detail is actually beautiful when you picture it. First up, you have the Gershonites. Moses counts them, and there are 7,500 males. They are told to camp on the west side, right behind the tabernacle. And their specific job? The textiles. They are totally responsible for the tabernacle tent itself, all its coverings, the curtains at the entrance, the courtyard curtains, and all the ropes. Next, we have the Kohathites. They number 8,600 males. They're assigned to camp on the south side. Their duty is arguably the most sensitive. They handle the sacred furniture. We're talking about the ark, the table, the lampstand, the altars, and all the holy articles used for ministering. Because of how sacred this is, they operate under the direct supervision of Eleazar, Aaron's son, who is the chief leader of all the Levites. Finally, we get to the Merarites. Just imagine the sheer physical strength required for their job. They're in charge of the heavy wooden frames, the crossbars, the posts, the heavy bases, and all the courtyard pillars. They have to literally carry all of this through the desert. They count 6,200 males, and they camp on the north side. So you see, everyone has a place. Everyone has a specific, irreplaceable job.
But wait a minute, we're missing one side of the compass, right? We covered west, south, and north. What about the east? Well, verse 38 places Moses, Aaron, and Aaron's sons right there at the entrance to the east, facing the sunrise. They camp directly in front of the tent of meeting, and this makes perfect sense. They act as the ultimate buffer zone, keeping the charge of the sanctuary on behalf of all the Israelites. Once again, the text doesn't pull any punches. Any unauthorized person who approaches is to be put to death. When Moses and Aaron finally tally up this entire Levite census, exactly as commanded by the Lord, verse 39 gives us the final number. The total count of Levite males from 1 month old and up is exactly 22,000.
Moving right along to section 3, redeeming the firstborns. We are at verse 40 now.
So remember how God claimed the firstborns, and now he's taking the Levites in their place? Well, to do this fairly and accurately, they actually need to do the math. God commands Moses to run a second completely separate census. This time, he has to go through all the other tribes and count every single firstborn Israelite male from 1 month old and upward, listing them all by name. Just imagine the administrative headache of doing this in a desert camp of over 1 million people. But Moses does exactly what he's told, and he gets his number. The total comes out to exactly 22,273 firstborn Israelite males. But here is where we run into a bit of a logistical problem. As we just saw back in verse 39, the total number of Levites stepping in to replace them was exactly 22,000. So you've got 22,273 firstborns who belong to God, but only 22,000 Levites available to trade places with them. You see the issue, right? There is a surplus. There are 273 firstborn Israelites left over with no Levite to take their place.
So how do they fix this? Well, the crucial point in verses 46 to 51 is this exact mathematical transaction, to literally redeem or buy back those 273 extra firstborns. God is perfectly precise here. He tells Moses, look at the difference. You have 273 extra Israelites. To release them from their obligation, you need to collect a redemption price, and that price is exactly 5 shekels for each person. So Moses does the math. 273 multiplied by 5 equals exactly 1,365 shekels of silver. Moses goes out and collects this exact amount from the Israelites who exceeded the number of the Levites. And then, just as God commanded, he hands every single piece of this redemption money directly over to Aaron and his sons. The ledger is perfectly balanced. Nobody is shortchanged.
Okay, section 4, clarifying difficult terms. Let's pause to look at that money really quickly.
You might be wondering, what exactly is a sanctuary shekel? When God tells Moses to collect 5 shekels, he explicitly says to use the sanctuary shekel. Why specify that? Well, in the ancient world, weights could vary from merchant to merchant. A shekel in one camp might weigh slightly less than a shekel in another, which could easily lead to cheating or disputes. By specifying the sanctuary shekel, which the text tells us weighs exactly 20 gerahs, roughly half an ounce, of silver per shekel, God ensures that the redemption is completely standardized. It's fair, it's exact, and it's totally above dispute.
Moving to section 5, practical life lessons.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? It's really easy to look at a chapter full of ancient censuses, tribal numbers, and redemption math and wonder why it matters to us today. But even without getting into any deep mysticism, just looking at the simple meaning, the Peshat, this text teaches us that true harmony requires order, boundaries, and a profound respect for our individual roles. Look at how beautifully organized that camp is. North, south, east, west. Every single clan knew exactly where to sleep and exactly what to carry. Think about the Merarites, for example. They weren't jealous that the Kohathites got to carry the shiny, sacred golden furniture. They just owned their specific job of carrying the heavy wooden posts. When we drop our egos and just own our specific responsibilities, our own communities can function just as beautifully. Also, that stark reminder of Nadab and Abihu's death at the very beginning of the chapter, and the constant repeated warnings about unauthorized people approaching the sanctuary, that teaches us that sacred things must be treated with deep, deep reverence. Good intentions simply aren't enough. Obedience and respect for boundaries truly matter.
Finally, Section 6, a short chapter recap.
Let's lock in everything we just covered. We went through a lot of ground, but the chronological flow of chapter 3 is remarkably clear. We started in verses 1 through 13 with the establishment of Aaron's priesthood and the tragic loss of his oldest sons. Then, in verses 14 through 39, we saw the grand, meticulous organization of the Gershonite, Kohathite, and Merarite camps surrounding the tabernacle. And finally, in verses 40 through 51, we saw Moses balancing the redemption ledger of the firstborn Israelites down to the very last shekel. The chapter unfolds with perfect step-by-step logic. It literally transforms a vast, wandering multitude of refugees into a highly organized, purposeful community centered entirely around the presence of God. So as you reflect on this ancient blueprint of strict boundaries and very specific duties, ask yourself, what are the responsibilities in your own life that you need to start treating with a bit more reverence? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.